Hi, guys, and welcome to the Raw Light Podcast. My name is Danielle Baker, and thank you for being here today. Thank you to everybody for being here for another week. It's absolutely amazing to be able to speak to you guys and share my teachings. And I actually am re recording this because yesterday I sat down and I was like recording some things, and I was in a really emotional place. Um, when we don't kind of process our emotions properly and then we just like spit them out and spit them into like people that we love or um, just kind of like don't think about how we're processing our emotions enough, and then a lot of us react on that emotion, and it's something that I'm being very super conscious about. Instead of reacting and not reacting and sitting on things and thinking about things before speaking, my husband and I are both doing that with our communication, and we're figuring things out together with our communication at the moment. So it's really important for both of us to kind of practice these things. So yesterday I did like a full podcast and I was like, wow, that was a very emotional podcast. I don't think you guys need to know that. And it's not because I don't want to share that part of my life with you guys. I just think that this podcast is about me sharing my teachings, and yes, it is very real, authentic, and I'm very honest about it, but I don't feel like you guys need to be listening in on certain things that are just private for myself. So I was just like, I'm going to re record this for you guys and do a boundaries podcast. And I'm going to paint you a picture. I'm sitting in my living room. I have a really warm, comfy jumper, which you've probably seen on some of my stories. I literally don't take this jumper off, it's so comfy. And I have the most baggiest, comfiest pants that I bought when I was pregnant with Oakley. I got them from the Royal Codes, and they are probably the most comfy fucking things that I've ever worn in my life. So jump over to the Royal Codes and have a look at their stuff. It is pricey, but it's worth it. I don't actually see it as being pricey because I feel like clothes that have value on it, made from good materials, are way better than clothes that you can just buy that are $10 and you have to rebuy them again a month later. That is how I feel about it, because I look at the world in such a bigger perspective when it comes to abundance and money. Abundance to me means so much, so different to what probably people think it does. I will do another podcast on that, but for today we are going to go into boundaries, and we're going to chat a bit about our own boundaries, boundaries with partnerships, boundaries with in-laws, boundaries with families, everything. So think about your boundaries that you have in your life. What boundaries have you created? And do you let people cross your boundaries on a regular basis? Because this is something I've had to work on my whole life. I'm a pretty chilled person. I genuinely did not, when I was younger, like confrontation, but I would blow up very quickly because I didn't know how to process my emotions. Um, and I never really had boundaries probably until like, I was 25, 24, 25. What am I now? I'm nearly 30. So that's like only 5 years of boundaries in my life. Out of your whole life, I've only had fucking 5 years of boundaries. Guys, boundaries are so important. And let me explain why. You know, when someone crosses a boundary or says something to you and you feel like it's inappropriate, and it genuinely is inappropriate, and then you allow them to keep going, and then you blow up at them. As soon as they say something that crosses your boundaries, you should be in a place where you can go, hey, what you just said to me is kind of inappropriate. You might not have meant it that way, but this is how it made me feel. Boundaries are here to protect us in our whole life. It doesn't matter if you have a work boss, your husband, your wife. Um, it does not matter who it is, your family. You need to have boundaries. And this is something that I work on with women a lot. And it's what women actually struggle with a lot, is having boundaries. I had boundaries problems with men. That was my biggest thing. I've never been afraid to tell my family where my boundaries are at. I've always had solid boundaries, and that's probably because my middle brother and his wife have always had really solid boundaries, and they have never been afraid to be like, no, this is our boundaries, please don't cross them. And they don't sway from them. Okay, they don't sway from them. And this used to bother me because I'd be like, well, why don't you just, budge a little bit, and why don't you just. And now, after becoming a parent and becoming a mother and doing my work a lot more and trying to take care of clients and doing a lot of other things, I actually don't have space and time for much else. So boundaries to me are super important. I am very, very good at putting them down when they are needed. And I mean, like, you pick your battles. You don't be a bitch, and you don't be somebody that is just like, nope, these are my boundaries, in like a mean and nasty way. You can put them down in a strong and respectful way. And I feel like that a lot of us get a bit afraid because we haven't worked on our strength within inside our body, and we become really scared to be able to be like, hey, this is my boundary, please respect it. I actually know quite a few business people that I really admire. One is Steph. She is a really amazing businesswoman. She actually has really good boundaries, and she's had really good boundaries with me for a really long time with work stuff when we've worked together. I actually admire people that put boundaries down, especially with myself. When I grew up, I was a pretty dominating child, because always been very strong headed. So for me, I have been able to dominate people not in a healthy way. And over the last probably like 6 years, I've really learnt that being and having respectful boundaries for other people and for yourself needs to be respected. It is for their safety and what they need in their life. And I feel like even in partnerships and relationships. So let me go back to the basics of it all. Boundaries are simply there that literally when we've grown up as a child, we never had that protection for ourselves because your parents' boundaries would have been different to possibly what you as an adult now see as something that you need as a boundary for your own safety. So back in the day, our parents all had boundaries in totally different ways, or they might not have had boundaries at all. So then they're not used to when their children come in and say, hey, this has just really hurt my feelings. And they go, well, where has this come from? How dare you put boundaries with me? I'm your parent, in a dominating way. Boundaries are literally showing you who in your life respects you and who in your life doesn't. Boundaries are really important, guys. If you have a friend at the moment, a family member, your partner, somebody else that keeps crossing your boundaries, it is time for you to start speaking up and using your voice. Boundaries are a safe and a home for you to live in your body. If you don't want to have sex with somebody, that is your boundary. If somebody crosses that, that is classified as assault. Those types of things. If somebody doesn't respect your boundaries when you're speaking to them, that's emotional abuse. Like there's most people will come from a place of what they've been taught and all they know. So make sure that when you're looking at it and being like, well, you're not respecting my boundaries, have a look at the person, have a look at them as a person and go, okay, this person, I can see that they've got a lot of emotional stuff going on in their life and they have for a really long time. They're not understanding my boundaries, nor are they going to respect them. I might want to take a bit of distance from them until they can understand, or they might not understand, where your boundaries are at. Unfortunately, a lot of people this lifetime and in general don't understand boundaries because they've never been taught it. So then when a friend puts something in place all of a sudden, or they start saying no to things, or they get shamed for it. They get shamed for not drinking, not going out, or they get shamed for not talking about someone or bitching about somebody. You know, we've really got to move past this whole not respecting people and where they're coming from, especially women to women. I find that a lot of women get really narky about other women behind their back, and it's kind of like, well, she did this and she did that, and oh, look at her, she thinks she knows what she's doing. And if they have been friends with you before and they've put boundaries in with you, that says a lot about more about you than it does about them, especially when they say, women who don't respect other people's, like women's boundaries, really cross people's boundaries and really like to insert themselves in other people's lives. And that might be uncomfortable to hear, but it's very, very true. Boundaries, when you want to cross someone's boundary, you want to really test if they're really real and if they're really there. Now, we've had to work on, and I've had to work on boundaries in my life. And I always do what I do with my partner's family, I do with my family. There is no in between. I'm always even on equal sides. Because if you're not, then it's showing your partner that you might be favoring one side to the other. And I try and be as equal as I possibly can so that everybody can feel respected the best way they possibly can. And also, it is about me and my family and where I'm at as a woman and also our life and what we're creating. I feel like a lot of parents like to cross boundaries and insert themselves in their children's lives because they really are afraid of losing them and they've never known what boundaries are. And they like to cross and test those boundaries to see if you and your partner have a strong enough relationship to kind of bond together. And also, if they've never had anybody kind of stand up to them and go, this makes me feel uncomfortable. Please stop talking about this. Please stop putting me in this position. Please stop putting me in that position. I feel like that we normally allow our parents to walk all over us, and we don't need to. We are our own person, we're our own being, and we should have boundaries for our safety and security. And if they really think that it is disrespectful to them, then that is their point of view and their reflection back to them that they are the person that probably needs to take a look at why it's affecting them when you've put boundaries up. It's not because you don't love them, it's because you do love them that you need to have boundaries up, or you're not going to be able to give them what they need at the time when you do say yes to something. And honestly, when someone crosses one of my boundaries now, I'm like, wow, you really are disrespecting me. It's a really big disrespect. If I've asked something of somebody and they go about it the opposite way, and I just explain that for us, this is what we would like to do, if you could please let us know, blah, 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 and they go do the opposite, it really shows me that they don't really respect my voice and who I am as a woman, and it really is off putting. I don't know about everybody else, but for me, it's very, very off putting. So I try and make sure that I write down in like little bubbles, like 3 or 4 main things that I value in my life that I will not budge on as boundaries. And within that, I write down why I feel like it's really important to me and why I feel like these boundaries shouldn't be crossed. And then I speak to my husband about his boundaries. And then we work on our boundaries together and what we feel as a family that we don't cross and that we do cross, those types of things. These are the really important communication conversations that need to happen within relationships, or things start to go downhill pretty quick. And I can tell you, Josh and I have had many experiences of both of us going, well, I thought this was our boundary and then you've allowed this person to cross that, or I thought this was our boundary and you let that person cross that. So, and it's caused more arguments than is needed. So you both need to be on the same page as boundaries when it comes to relationships. You need to be a united front when it comes to boundaries. And you need to make sure that you're both happy and you're both going to continue putting those boundaries down if one person isn't there. And this is the strongest part about it. People will want to push your boundaries, people want to change your mind and change your boundaries, and they will poke and prod to see if you will move. You need to be so solid that you in yourself know that you will not budge. Okay, that you will not move from these boundaries. It is highly, highly important for you to know what you will budge on and what you won't budge on in your relationship and in your family. Um, it's really important. Boundaries are one of the biggest foundations of life, and yet we give them no attention until it's far too late, or we get into a relationship and we realize that we haven't set a solid foundation of boundaries. Even with friendships, you might be friends with someone over 20 years and it has stayed the same, and they're not willing to respect your boundaries. I've had that happen quite a few times where, you put boundaries down and then they get really upset because they're not sure what they've done wrong. But when you explain to them that it's nothing that they've done wrong, it's just you're shifting and you're moving and you need to adjust your boundaries so you as a person feel safe within your life, if that makes sense. So, like I said, write things down, write on a piece of paper, get a pen out, get whatever you need, and have 4 circles or 5 circles, whatever you choose, make it into like a pretty flower or whatever you want. Write down what your personal boundaries are, write down what your family values are, write down if you're single when you're listening to this, write down what values you want in a partner so that when you meet them, if they don't meet your boundary needs, and I'm not talking about ridiculous boundaries like come on guys, you have to compromise on boundaries, as in like within yourself. You have to go, is this an actual boundary of mine, or is this just something that is coming from like my ego mind because I am really afraid that, if this person doesn't meet my needs then they need to leave, sort of thing. You have to consider what is a strong boundary and for a safety reason for you, because you know personally yourself well enough that if you don't have this boundary you can't give to other people. Or is it just basically like, I don't know, they don't meet your good looking needs and that's a boundary? That's not a boundary. So just be really aware of what boundaries that you want to create. And also, if you allow people to cross those boundaries and you don't use your voice, you'll notice it as well, because you're like, damn it, I really wanted to say to this person, you've really hurt me and you've really crossed my boundary. But sometimes it takes us a bit to think about it. I've had times where I've thought about things and I've gone, okay, this has really hurt me. I'm not afraid to put up boundaries with my partner. That is one big thing that I've always worked really hard on, is within myself knowing my boundaries, and also now with friends and lots of different things, I'm getting more stronger with my own personal boundaries as well. One thing I would like to improve on for myself is my boundaries with my spiritual work. Sometimes I don't have enough time, or I don't create enough space for me to be able to sit quietly like I used to for like 15 to 20 minutes to be able to really get into my meditations and really channel more. I basically channel as I'm sitting here in general, because I how I connect and those types of things, but sometimes it just feels like I don't get that. I judge myself on not putting that boundary down stronger, but also then I flip it the other way and I'm like, well, if I don't get enough rest, I can't be there for Oakley right now. It is just the season that I'm in right now. It's not going to be like this forever. And also, I make time now at night time to sketch that apart so that I can be more connected in myself as well. So, taking a notice where you sit in your life with your boundaries, where you might need to move and shift, and where you might need. Okay, I've got to go because my baby is just woken up from her sleep, but I will be back in about. For you guys, it'll be like a little blimp second. For me, it's like 4 hours. All right, guys, I'm back. For you guys, it would have been like a blink of a second. For me, it's been like 4.5 hours since I've been able to come back and have a chat to you guys. Mummy Judy's call. Um, but like I said, boundaries. They're really important this life, guys, for yourself and your own body, practice, mind, soul. It is really important to have boundaries down to protect yourself. This world is not made for people without boundaries. It's made for people with no boundaries at all, that can basically walk all over you and are allowed to do and say what they want. And there is a lot of people out there that are happy to do that. There's a lot of people happy to be dominating because they've been dominated their whole life, so they think that it's the way to get something in their life is to dominate and overstep and need to be informed about everything and get upset and defensive if they're not, and those types of things. Boundaries are our biggest safety net in life, and we need to start putting them down and in the ground for ourselves, or we're going to end up feeling really lonely because no one listens to us and what we're wanting, and we're not feeling like we're being heard or seen. But it's because we haven't put boundaries down ourselves as women. And then it follows on into our life, and whenever we speak up or say something, or we say no or yes, and then people don't really listen, then you go, well, why aren't you listening to me? But you've never put any of these boundaries down before. So when you start to lay boundaries, you need to gently implement them into your life and not just whack them all of a sudden and be like this, and this, but you can gently start to put them down and gently start to put boundaries down. You know what? The biggest thing that you can do as a parent as well for being a mum is to put boundaries down, because for your children, they're going to learn then that it is safe to put boundaries down themselves. that if somebody crosses them at school or in the park or as they get older, they know that their boundaries are their word and then they respect that. Whether when we allow our children to overstep our boundaries because we love them so much, and there's nothing wrong with loving our children so much, but if we allow them to step over our boundaries, then we're basically letting them have our power. We're allowing them to take our power away from us, and we're teaching them that it's okay to not have solid boundaries themselves. So when they grow up, they feel like they aren't allowed to say no to things or put safety up, like I don't want to hug this person, or because if you're at a party, right, and a bunch of guys came up to you or something like that and they're like, oh, give us a hug, and you're like, honestly, I just don't feel comfortable, I'm not going to. Would you make your child do that? If you're in a big group of people and your child is with you, and like I've been in awkward situations where like uh, uh, some of my parents' aunties or something like that come up to my child and basically just like people that I don't know, like they're like long Italian lines of people that my parents know but I don't know, and they try and kiss my child, I literally move them away or say no, because I don't know them and nor do they have the right to touch my child. So that's a boundary. That's one of my boundaries that I don't allow. It doesn't bother me to say no to family members. It does not bother me at all, because I am first and foremost, when it comes to my child, their caregiver. And if I don't protect them, then who's going to? No one. Then they grow up feeling like they haven't been protected or loved because we couldn't stand up and step up or speak out and say something that, is very protecting our children. It is really important that we learn how to set these boundaries ourselves so we can protect our own children. We can protect them from people and things that do cause harm, because reality kicks in and people aren't there for the right reasons. Sexual assault does happen. That's why boundaries are really important. It doesn't matter if you have your husband's best friend's mate comes over and they're hanging out with the kids and stuff like that. I've even with my partner's friends, they're all wonderful people, but I still keep an eye on them, because Oakley is a little girl, she's young. You don't know what's in people's minds. It doesn't matter if I know them or not. I'm going to have my boundaries with people. Having boundaries is safe, guys. It's really important that we start to put them in place, or our children and for ourselves, we're going to lose the sight of actually being able to step into our strength as women. We basically give our power away with our boundaries being crossed, with people overly talking over top of us, not allowing us to speak up. That's a boundary crossing for me. When people just assume, I don't like it when people assume that I want to do something or I've done something, or those types of things. And then they just make the decision themselves. That's a boundary cross for me, because it's basically like I feel then that they don't see me, they feel more superior than me. When it comes to do with my life and my choices, I'm not going to allow someone to overrun me with their lack of boundaries and thinking that I have no boundaries when I do. I run a very tight ship these days. I'm very tight ship. My husband and I have spoken about this several times, and you know what? Family members are not going to like it. Friends are not going to like it. Co-workers aren't going to like it. But if something isn't working for you, say your boundary with your mental health is not going out and drinking on a weekend, and you do, and then you end up in shambles, you've crossed your own boundary. So do you cross your own boundaries? Do you not back up yourself when you know that your intuition is saying, no, don't do this because we know what's going to end up like tomorrow, and you go, oh, fuck it, it doesn't matter. And everyone's like, yes, I love you, you're the yes girl. Do you know what? I'll tell you a little bit about my life, and basically when I was younger, so it was in my early 20s, I loved my friends so much that I said yes to everything, and I was so afraid to say no to things because I'd never really had this type of strong connection or friendship with these people before. But it was pretty bad for me because I said yes all the time. I didn't know how to be on my own at all. And I drank a lot and I went out a lot. I had no money and I basically would come home crying in the shower every night and the next day and have anxiety the next day because I crossed my own boundaries. I knew that I shouldn't have been drinking that much. I knew that I shouldn't have gone out. I shouldn't have said yes to that. I should have been looking after my money more. I had a small apartment. I loved my apartment, but I couldn't look after myself anymore. I could barely afford food. I basically I basically used to be vegetarian because I couldn't afford meat. How sad's that? And I didn't want to tell anybody that I was basically just surviving. I had a pretty decent job, but I was working over 40 hours a week. I wasn't sleeping very well, and when I did rest, I couldn't sit still because my mind was wandering. I was running every single day because I had top of anxiety. So I allowed myself to cross my own boundaries for 4 years. 4 years. I went down this road of allowing myself to cross my own personal boundaries. And it's pretty bad when I think about it. I was pretty messed up by the time I came home. I had to call my parents to come get me because I was like, I'm just not coping. The workplace that I was at, my boss was basically bullying me. She was not very nice. I was helping her run the salon and she wasn't a very nice person. Um, and so I allowed that in my life for a really long time. Then when I started to hang out with my really close friends now, who we all kind of went on an open journey of like spirituality at that time, and we were really deep in it. I'm definitely not in as in deep as I am now with it, as I was then, and now I'm a lot more balanced, but they helped me realize the boundaries that I was crossing for myself and also the boundaries that I allowed people to cross. Like I had this boundary up to not sleep with somebody because they were unhealthy with me. And yet, every time I saw them, I allowed myself to cross that boundary. And what happened the next day? The exact same thing. I felt really shit within myself. I didn't feel good within my body. My body was literally talking to me the whole time and I ignored it. I crossed so many boundaries with myself for so long. I'm not going to do it anymore. I can't do it anymore. And before I met my husband, I had pretty solid boundaries, but then I just allowed them to be a lot more solid. You know, People are going to judge you for having boundaries. And when I started to step away from friendships because I was like, I just need to take a step back. I'm growing and I need to grow on my own for a little bit. I've been far too stuck in what everyone else is doing and not what I need to do. They really felt it. They really felt me pull my energy away. And that normally happens to a lot of people if I start to pull away a little bit. But I'm protecting myself and protecting my own energy because if I keep giving it out, I'm not going to have anything left for myself. And this is why I have the podcast so that I can give people the information and the things and my learnings and lessons of my own personal boundaries so that people can understand that it's really important to have your own boundaries. And when I started to put boundaries up for myself, I started to realize that I actually didn't respect myself at all. I was happy to give my body away and happy to please other people. And you know what? It's very common for people to go down the road of, judgment. Like right now, you're probably thinking, wow, she probably slept around a lot. Well, you know what? I didn't, but I did enjoy sex and I do enjoy sex. I've always enjoyed it. I have a thriving energy system inside my body. So for me, I've never really had good boundaries around my body and myself. I've had to learn how to be more controlled in my own boundaries with myself and self pleasure and those types of things as well because I literally have so much energy, guys, that I have to have some sort of boundaries around myself because I could have sex all day, every day, and be fine with it. I am like literally switched on constantly and thriving in this area when it comes to things just because of the energy work that I do. And I literally have energy pulsing through me 24/7, light energy through my body 24/7. So for me, not protecting this would be really stupid, but for a very long time, I didn't protect myself. I didn't respect myself. I didn't respect the energy and I didn't respect the work that I was about to do. And this was in my early 20s. So I started to realize that that was the person I didn't want to be. I wanted to start to respect myself and love myself. That's why I hit celibacy, because I was like, I need to learn boundaries around myself. I fall into things way too far and way too easily when I was younger. It was way too easily for me to just like allow myself to be like, yeah, whatever, I don't care, and just like I was very much, I would call myself, you know what? Sometimes I overthink back and I was like, was I a fuck boy? Like a fuck girl for a little bit there? And it wasn't, and I didn't go around sleeping with people, but for a bit there I dated around. And I didn't sleep with everybody, but some people I slept with. And I crossed my boundaries several times when I knew that I shouldn't have, you know? Um, that's just the way that it is. You learn from your lessons and you learn from your mistakes. And in my life, I've had to learn from those lessons about my boundaries around my body, my boundaries around my energy, and my boundaries around my work. And how am I supposed to do that? How are we supposed to learn if we don't make mistakes, if we don't grow, if we don't see where we need to expand in our life? And that was the biggest lesson for me. It was great. I had the strongest energy I've ever had when I was in celibacy because I literally just focused every day. I came home from work, I got in a bath, I got out, I meditated, I stretched and did yoga, and I went to sleep every single night. And it was the most light that I had ever been. Literally, even to this day, with all the work that I do now, it was literally like an upgrade for myself, because at that point in time in my life, I'd come back from Perth and I was an absolute mess. I'd really, really become very ungrounded, unsettled, and needed to come back, regroup, and figure out what I was doing and then set myself up for my next stages. So, through this, I have learnt what my boundaries are and what they aren't. And then I met my husband and I learnt what my boundaries were there and what my boundaries aren't, and so on and so on. So I think you guys get the gist of boundaries. You get the gist of how to work out where your boundaries are at. And also, this process is really good to just journal about why you feel certain boundaries are there. Is it to protect yourself? Is it because your body and soul genuinely feels like this aligns with you so much, and you're sick of putting up with, feeling like you have no power in your life? Boundaries put power back into your life. And as scary as it is, you're going to keep having people cross your boundaries until you learn to balance out your boundaries again, until you learn to put down your boundaries again. So until you do that, you're going to have people pop up in your life, whether it's a boss, a partner, relationships, sisters, mothers, brothers, in-laws, they're literally going to keep crossing it until you learn how to stand for yourself. This, like, life is a game, guys. You basically have to learn how to play it. And I know sometimes it's really fucking tough, but you really do have to learn how to play it. What boundaries are showing up for you to make sure that you don't allow other people to cross them? What boundaries do you need to learn within yourself so that you can feel safe and secure? So I'm going to leave it at that, but I really hope that you guys do think about where you're at in your life and where your boundaries are. Even at a 40-year-old, someone in their 40s still needs to look at where their boundaries are. Reassess every couple of months where your boundaries are. Because sometimes when you leak your energy and you're trying to build a business, or you're trying to start an entrepreneurship or those types of things, or you're at your work and you feel like you don't have power, if you are leaking your energy to certain people and these people are unhealthy, it is just going to be the same cycle until you break that cycle. So learning how to break that cycle is really, really important. So I'm going to leave you with that today. I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast, and I will see you guys next week.